Part 92. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 912. The people at the back heard Lily's question and replied one after another that they were not injured. It was related to the safety of everyone's lives. Naturally, no one dared to mess around. Lily confirmed it twice. Several people said that they were not injured. They heard that others were not. It was obvious that he was injured. Lily breathed a sigh of relief and dragged Mr. Wen down to the ground. Time waited for no one at this time. The corpse slaves were obviously a little wild and uneasy. The people who came down each covered their bodies with glutinous rice bags. After talking, Lily took the lead and walked towards the coffin. There were still a few people on the edge of the well who did not dare to come down. They were obviously planning to wait for Lily and others to lift the coffin and make sure they found a way out before coming down, even though they knew this. The people who came down were gnashing their teeth with hatred, but it was impossible for the group of people who came down to hide next to the well like them. Therefore, the people who came down cursed again and again, and still walked to the red coffin tremblingly. Sighed. Lily once again cast a few spells to control the corpse slaves and others, and then the few people who came down joined forces to surround the coffin. Except for Lily, Tang Quan, and the middle-aged people who came down first, Mr. Wen and his wife were surrounded by the coffin. The middle-aged fat man who died of his apprentice, the girl named Zhao Hongxian, was also squeezed from the well platform and stood with a tall and thin man wearing a blue silk coat. Her mother, Ms. Mu, was looking at her with a serious look on her face. He stood by the well looking at her worriedly, not daring to come over. There were 8 people standing by the coffin at this time, and the remaining 7 people all stood by the well platform and did not dare to come over. Lily called out several times in a row, and the people standing by the coffin started to curse, but everyone on the edge of the well platform did not. He acted as if he hadn't heard anything and didn't dare to come down. Seeing such a scene, the 8 people standing in Tai Chi Yin Yang suddenly became angry, resentful, and helpless. These people were obviously cheating. He wanted to stay peacefully by the well platform without having to face these corpse slaves, but he didn't want to come over to carry the coffin. He just wanted to wait for them to find a way out and escape directly. But even everyone understands this. But the 8 people couldn't do anything about them. There was no way they wouldn't come. A group of people were just waiting there like them. Lily was right. When her magic power is exhausted, everyone will die here. Instead of quarreling with others at this critical moment of life and death, it is better to fight. If you are lucky enough to survive, it is better to settle accounts with these shameless people after you get out. It's much better to fight with others. There are exactly 8 people, 2 of them standing in the same direction. Use the borrowed strength to lift the coffin together. Lily gave the order, and Mrs. Wen asked tremblingly. What does borrowing power mean? Mr. Wen also had a look of confusion in his eyes. His mouth was injured and Lily had just stuffed the talisman into his mouth. In less than 2 minutes, several soybean-sized blisters appeared on the lips, and the surrounding areas were swollen. At this critical moment, Lily felt tired of having to tell these 2 people what borrowing power was. And the people beside the well platform also became a little impatient. The Wen couple were not real Taoists, so it was normal for them not to understand the so-called borrowing power. Lily sighed. The sky and the earth are infinite, and the universe is borrowed from the law. She recited a string of spells very quickly. The left and right hands each deducted some mana. Photographed into the vests of Mr. and Mrs. Wen respectively. I borrowed my magic power for you 2 to use for 2 minutes. Within these 2 minutes, the coffin must be moved. Although Lily's magic power is pure, the Wen family are not orthodox monks. Therefore, no matter how good it is, these 2 people don't know how to use it. It will take a few minutes at most to dissipate completely, and the effect will gradually be greatly reduced. The most important thing is that Lily has gradually smelled the rancid and rich smell of blood in the blood pool. Apparently the blood flow has gradually poured into the mouth of the well and is getting closer to this place. She is very worried about the blood in these blood pools. Once they come down, the strength of these zombie slaves will explode. You must know that these corpse slaves are now restrained by the Bagua array, and each one only has its own fixed territory. As long as the magic power is not too weak, it is not difficult to temporarily entangle them, but it is difficult to only entangle them instead of killing them. It's a bit difficult. Killing the corpse slaves may not only break this strange balance, but most importantly, it may awaken the things in the coffin in the middle. But if you don't kill them, these corpse slaves will consume this gossip infinitely. The magic power of everyone in the formation. At present, Lily can deal with these corpse slaves with ease, but if the blood in the blood pool flows down, it is hard to say what the consequences will be. Since the people who set up this formation have considered all aspects, including the human heart, the capabilities of these corpse slaves have been estimated just right. Lily does not believe that the blood effect of the blood pool is only to drive people down the well. This blood should have other functions. If the coffin cannot be lifted up and the passage underneath is found within 2 minutes, then once the blood flows into the bottom of the well, everyone will be buried in the Bagua array. No one around them dared to make a sound at this moment. Tang Quan and others were chanting mantras to pray to the gods. Everyone was so nervous that they were sweating like rain. They all stood properly. Lily and the girl named Zhao Hongsheng stood together. The Wen family and his wife stood on one side, and the other 4 people, including Tang Quan, each stood at 2 corners. They touched the coffin with their hands and tried to lift the coffin at the same time. But the coffin didn't feel very strong at first. Although it looked big, it didn't seem to be very heavy. I wonder if it was because the person in the red coffin had a noble status before death. There might be many valuable things buried inside. At this time, the 8 people worked together, and they still used the result of asking God to lend their strength, but they tried their best, but they couldn't make their faces turn red, and the coffin didn't move at all. Hoo-ho-ho, the actions of several people moving the coffin caused all the corpse slaves around to become angry, as if they had been touched by the reverse scale. One of them even ignored that he was burned by the fire dragon, and dug his long black nails into his chest. Originally, these purple corpses were already rotten, and rotten Lily just touched them before, and the corpse fluids flowed all over her hands. Now, the purple corpses dug themselves into the chest, and the black and rotten flesh was accompanied by the thick corpse fluids. Slowly coming out, it actually extinguished the fire dragons released by the Samadhi true fire with the power of the dragon god. The fire dragon let out a cry from its mouth, and with a flash of red light, the body originally wrapped around the purple corpse shrank smaller and smaller, and finally turned into a talisman with a swish sound, floated in the air twice, burned, and turned into a talisman. Ash. Once the corpse slave broke free, he rushed over like crazy regardless of his own safety. When several people were about to scream and lean against the coffin and tremble, Lily had no choice but to hold on to the coffin. He let go of his hand, dodged, turned sideways, and jumped into the air, kicking the corpse slave out with one leg. With a boom, the corpse slave was kicked like a kite with a broken string and flew backwards. He went out and hit the wall covered with runes hard before falling down. A lot of the rotten flesh on its body fell off due to the impact, and a lot of broken flesh was still left on the wall, splattering everywhere, but its ferocity remained unabated, and it made a sharp sound from its mouth and moved toward Lily again. It rushed over, and this time it came even more fiercely. The eyes that should have lost their sparkle long ago actually reflected a green light under the illumination of the surrounding skull wall lamps. When it rushed over again, Lily bounced again. He got up and kicked it back. The corpse slave didn't know the pain, and he was not a human being. He was supported by the corpse energy of resentment and the energy of death. In this ancient tomb, these things were the most indispensable, so if he didn't want to be cruel, Kill these corpse slaves with your hands. These things can be said to be almost invincible here. Lily kicked it a few times before, but it didn't feel any pain. Lily felt as if all the bones in her body were falling apart. Although the original owner had some background in martial arts, it seemed that he was still not good enough at this time. Finally, once, when Lily kicked the corpse slave in the chest, she didn't know if she had just kicked it twice in succession. The purple corpse hit the wall twice more, and a lot of the rotten flesh on its body was broken. Lily kicked it out again, and unexpectedly, his feet got stuck in the skeleton of this corpse slave. The power of the purple corpse was so great that Lily's feet were stuck in its bones. It couldn't feel the pain but still rushed towards Lily. At the critical moment, everyone saw the scene and trembled with fear. The surroundings were filled with corpse gas and the stench. Sunshine, the corpse slave stuck Lily's sternum, raised his arms and thrust it into Lily's face. Tang Quan's expression changed, and when he was about to take out something, Lily's leg got stuck in its sternum. Relying on its body, he jumped up and turned around. Before the corpse slave's palm touched his face, the other foot kicked it on the shoulder again. With this strength, Lily successfully pulled out her stuck leg. The corpse slave took 2 steps back. When he was about to pounce forward again, Lily had almost finished reciting the spell in his mouth, and used both hands to 2 of the fire dragons rushed out, roaring and entangled the corpse slave tightly. The corpse slave roared in anger, but could no longer move forward. Although she subdued the purple corpse again, most of Lily's strength was exhausted. She gritted her teeth and endured the sequelae caused by the excessive exertion of her legs and walked to the coffin again. The other corpse slaves were faintly visible. It also seemed like they were about to break away from the shackles of the fire dragon. They didn't have much time. At this moment, the people beside the well began to urge. "Are you okay? Hurry up, the blood will start to flow. Hurry up, we can't hold on any longer." The people at the well platform felt both desperate and panicked, and they kept crying. The rancid smell of blood became stronger and stronger, and a group of people couldn't help but cry out on their foreheads. There were huge beads of sweat, and everyone in Tai Chi Yin and Yang had already tried their best to suck milk, but the coffin, which I don't know how it was made, didn't move at all. The cold sweat on everyone's body was layer after layer. The hair on my back stood up. To be continued. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 913. At this moment, everyone at the well finally couldn't bear it any longer. The remaining 7 people at the well huddled together, and some even hung tightly on others, just to free up more space. No matter how slow the blood flow was, everyone in the Bagua array had already seen the thick blood, not to mention the few people beside the well platform. Although those people were afraid of the purple corpse below, but this seeing that there was no way to escape, the blood flowed down faster and faster, forcing several people to have no place to hide. The few people hugging each other finally couldn't bear it anymore and rolled down together. Almost at the same time, 2 dark and withered hands of Leng Huishu, who had been silent until now, stretched out from the coffin cover. Those hands easily cut through the coffin that had just been cut by Lily and the other 8 people. There was no way to lift the coffin lid, and there was only a loud bang sound, and a black shadow jumped into the air at a very fast speed. The coffin lid was blown away, and hit the mountain wall above the head with a bang sound. At the top, the force was so strong that several marks were made on the top wall, and the gravel above the head fell down. The next moment, a smell of pythium, like old mothballs, spread into everyone's nostrils, and the bouncing figure rushed towards the edge of the wellhead at lightning speed with a squeaking sound of pearls and jade hitting it. When Lily saw all this, her heart almost jumped into her throat. The red coffin had not been moved at all. The moment the black figure jumped up, she even pushed the coffin subconsciously, but did not push. The idea of finding a way out from under the coffin was completely shattered at this time, and there was a sense of death. Shrouded in the heads of everyone, could it be that I have worked hard for so many times? After entering countless mission reincarnations, this is the only result. Lily breathed heavily into her chest, her whole body was cold and trembling, but soon her eyes became firm. Get into the coffin, there was nothing else here except the red coffin. It seems to be a dead end, but from what I saw after entering the cemetery, it is obvious that the person who organized the layout is closely connected between life and death. The layout of the cemetery is so large. Although the things in the coffin were fierce, she really didn't want to believe that the cemetery had taken such a large amount of work and was laid out by a person who was proficient in formations and Taoist secret spells, and it would be nothing more than that. Even though the person in the tomb was very noble, the sixth sense she had developed over many missions made Lily instinctively feel that something was wrong. She wanted to take a gamble. Lily guessed that this ancient tomb should be a tomb within a tomb. It couldn't be that simple. There should be something else going on in this cemetery. If she guessed wrong, the ending would be the same as before, it would still be just death. But if she guessed correctly, maybe life would be in this coffin. She had a vague guess like this, but she just hadn't had time to test it yet. I don't know how the corpse in the coffin could be brought back to life, but at this critical moment, it was obvious that Lily had no time to think about it anymore. Instantly, a large amount of cold sweat was discharged from her body. She pushed Tang Quan with cold hands. This old man was kind to the original owner and had taken care of her several times. During the critical moment in the blood pool, he even subconsciously thought she had to sacrifice herself to pave the way for her, and she had to return this favor. When Tang Quan heard Lily's words, he jumped into the coffin in a hurry. The people around him also subconsciously squeezed into the coffin. At this critical moment, everyone was just like a drowning man catching a piece of duckweed, and they could no longer care whether what Lily said was correct or not. In the flash of lightning, a frightened scream came from the well platform. The smell of blood quickly spread, and the sound of chewing something raw reached everyone's ears. It stimulated everyone's already tortured hearts. Lily also wanted to crawl into the coffin, but at the same time, the blood on the edge of the well finally flowed down. When the first drop of blood fell into the Bagua array, the ground seemed to tremble, and those on the ground seemed to tremble. The moment the engraved talisman came into contact with the blood, it emitted bursts of light red luster. Bathed in this luster, the purple corpses in the Bagua array seemed to have grown a lot bigger. Originally, these corpse slaves were used by Lily with Taoist magic. The burnt and rotten flesh began to be repaired quickly. These corpse slaves seemed to have suddenly gained strength. The fire dragon was easily torn apart. Lily did not dare to look back to see this scene. She grabbed the edge of the well and tried to go in. She jumped, but the Wen couple on the side also wanted to squeeze in. Mrs. Wen panicked and subconsciously bumped into her, knocking her body crookedly. This is really self-inflicted. Just now, in order to make the Wen couple carry the coffin, Lily lent some of her Dao power to them. At this moment, the effect of the Dao power has not completely dissipated. The two couples were in panic and were like headless flies. The coffin was hit, and the power of Taoism combined with the strength that people burst out in critical moments actually knocked Lily away. Mrs. Wen took the lead and jumped in lightly. Before she could reach out to pull her husband, the purple corpse behind him got rid of it. The fire dragon, loyal to its master, rushed towards the center of the coffin. With a roar, a corpse slave slapped Lily's back. An extremely sharp pain came from her back vest. Lily's chest felt sweet, and she couldn't help but spit out a big mouthful of blood. Her body involuntarily rose into the air. At the critical moment, she subconsciously endured the pain. At the edge of the coffin, with this force, she forced her body to turn around and wanted to lie down in the coffin. Amidst the lightning and flint, she saw from the corner of her eye that the edge of the well platform was now stained with blood, and only a broken arm could be seen on the ground. The mutilated corpses, The 7 people before had disappeared now, it was just a snap of the fingers. She did not dare to look at it anymore, gritted her teeth and lay down in the coffin, while there were 2 other people beside her who could not crawl in. And the coffin lid that had been lifted by the black shadow above his head hit the top of the wall before falling down. With a critical force, the first person who was lying on the side of the coffin trying to climb in rolled down to the side of the well platform. The middle-aged man let out a shrill howl, and was crushed under the coffin lid. A black figure stepped over silently, and there was only a bang sound, as if a ball had been stepped on. The sound of explosion was heard. Mr. Wen, who was holding onto Mrs. Wen's hand and trying to climb into the coffin, didn't even hum. A black and fleshless hand was easily inserted into the back of his head. His originally delicate and gentle face showed through his fingertips. There was even a round eye hanging on the tip of one finger. In an instant, Mr. Wen, who had been screaming miserably, turned green and lost his breath. The thing easily opened Mr. Wen's skull, stuffed it into his mouth, chewed it twice, and then put his head into the coffin. Although everything that happened before seemed to everyone to have stretched out a lot of time, in fact, it only took a few breaths from the black shadow to the moment everyone lay down in the coffin. Although everyone had already been mentally prepared for the ferocity of the thing in the coffin, they had already heard it mentioned by Lily, but the facts were really revealed in front of everyone. Compared with hearing that the thing was ferocious and seeing it with their own eyes, the latter was undoubtedly more powerful. It's that the fear one faces is much deeper. The strong smell of blood came from all around, and the sweet smell of rust made people want to vomit. The few people who were still alive in the coffin were so frightened that they forgot to cry. They stared and just looked at a face that was dark and skinny, like a layer of black skin wrapped on a skeleton, poked into the coffin. This was a face that made people feel chilled at first glance. The scary thing about those eyes was that the whites of the eyes were still there. It wears a crown that symbolizes the power of the emperor. The 12-point multicolored crown worn on the silk thread has experienced many years, and the original bright colors can no longer be seen. However, as the thing probes its head, the beads are interacting with each other. The collision makes a clear and loud sound of ding ding dong dong. The crown is still stained with bright red flesh and blood, and the skin on its lips and face has long been dry and cracked and dark, unable to cover its powerful teeth. After many years, the sparse beard on its lips has actually become it's still there. At this moment, Senbei's teeth are exposed. Because of seeing the blood just now, a large amount of blood that has not been swallowed by it drips from its lips that are no longer covered by plump lips. Some of them fall on the edge of the coffin, a few drops made a soft sound, and landed on the face of Lily lying on the top of the coffin. The blood seemed to still have residual warmth, proving that the owner of the blood had not been dead for a long time. When a few drops of blood fell on Lily's face, it rolled down her face to both ears, and when it fell into her hair, it became colder, and the rolling brought out a light itch that penetrated into the bone marrow, making goosebumps stand up on Lily's body. The thin black thing stretched out its hand and put it on the coffin. The wide black cuffs were somewhat rotten, and there was a lot of hair and blood on them. The thing poked its head towards the coffin, and its eyes were more white than black. It's all lifeless, without any luster. Seeing it up close is even more terrifying. The people lying in the coffin were so frightened that no one dared to shout anymore. Even Mrs. Wen, who was usually the most noisy, seemed to have installed a silencer. She stared with her eyes and did not dare to make a sound. Time passed extremely slowly under such circumstances. Cold sweat broke out on Lily's back. She entered the coffin too late and was lying on the top. In other words, she was facing the closest position to death. This thing was inherently cruel. With the nourishment of the blood water in the blood pool, and the fact that it had just drunk the blood of a stranger, it became even more fierce. She was not necessarily an opponent. In the critical moment of life and death, Lily forced herself to calm down. She tried her best not to panic, but her body instinctively began to stiffen at this point. She could even feel the lady's heart beating beneath her body as if it was about to jump out of her body. Like a chest, this thing was already so close in front of her eyes, and the lifeless energy rushed towards her face. Even the crown on its head had already dropped to her forehead. It opened its mouth, and it seemed that it was going to bite Lily's face the next moment. To be continued. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 914. Lily's hands were scratching around in the coffin, trying to find the mechanism, but she couldn't find anything. Her heart dropped. At this critical moment, she was not prepared to wait for death like this. She was just trying to think of a way to put him to death. When this terrifying thing was repulsed, the thin black face touched her cheek, but somehow it didn't bite her, as if it smelled something. Its face was enough to make people tremble with fear. There was a humanized look of fear on his face. Before he got close, the thin and brittle skin at the corner of his mouth was twitched, and a whoa-whoa sound came out of his mouth. Corpse gas mixed with the stench of blood was sprayed on Lily. All over the face. Its body subconsciously took 2 steps back. Even when it stepped back, Lily could still hear the sound of blood splashing when it stepped in the blood pool. It paused for a moment, its eyes filled with black energy, and it let out several terrifying howls. The next moment it wanted to reach out to Lily. Lily originally wanted to but kicked it with its legs and forced it back. But when he was about to lift his right leg, it seemed to be hooked on some iron ring. She tried her best to move her body. At this moment, all the blood in her body seemed to be rushing to her mind due to nervousness, and her hands seemed to be a little difficult to control. She tried her best to reach down, hooked her toes on the iron ring, and kicked it hard. There was a soft click sound, like the sound of a copper ring knocking on the door in ancient times, followed by a crack sound as if the mechanism was triggered, the sound of gears turning, and the next moment the extremely ferocious Emperor's corpse roared. As they rushed towards Lily, the bottom of the coffin suddenly opened to the right, and the group of people rolled down diagonally. Lily rolled at the end, and only saw that the bottom of the coffin was like a revolving door that could rotate 180 degrees. After turning the direction, there was a dong sound and it was fastened tightly again. Roar. Everyone heard only the last angry roar of the Emperor's corpse, followed by the sound of a slap hitting the bottom of the coffin like a bang bang. Immediately afterwards, everyone lost their hearts and fell straight down, and no more noise was heard. She guessed it right. I also gambled my life back, and the feeling of surviving the disaster came. My body was too tight just now. So much so that once she relaxed, all the pain in her limbs and bones came out. The pain in her chest and the feeling of long-term lack of oxygen made her head dizzy. Only then did Lily come back to her senses. She had just been too nervous and, I almost forgot to breathe. She opened her mouth wide and gasped for air. The moldy air entered her lungs, and her heart, which had almost stopped beating with fear, began to beat wildly and unbridled. Dong 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 is as rapid as a battlefield drum beat. The feeling of losing the center of gravity was not pleasant. After falling from the coffin, everyone rolled down all the way. There was nothing around to control the body. After experiencing what just happened, everyone was already frightened and confused. At this time it fell down. But he didn't even dare to scream. Lily tried her best to stabilize her body in mid-air. She didn't know what was below. She finally escaped from the mouth of the Emperor's corpse just now. She didn't want to fall into a more dangerous place, but she just moved her body. A heartbreaking pain hit her from the back of her vest. Her face turned pale from the pain, and a large amount of cold sweat with a fishy smell came out of her pores. Her throat felt itchy, and a stream of blood poured down her throat. "Come in your mouth." The wind blew by the ears on both sides. Because of the speed of descent, the wind felt like a knife on the face. The excitement made the hairs on her face stand up, and Lily couldn't open her eyes. The first bang sound fell to the ground, as if a small piece of water was splashed. Then everyone fell to the ground one after another. Lily was originally on top of everyone in the coffin. But when the bottom of the coffin turned over and everyone fell to the ground, she was the first to fall. However, because of her weight, she was not the first to fall. She only heard a few soft sounds, and Lily knew it in her heart. When she was about to fall to the ground, she suppressed the pain in her chest, and the spiritual energy in her body moved around. When she fell to the ground with a bang, her body should instinctively roll forward a few steps, but she insisted. His hands and feet were forced into the slightly moist sand and gravel in the ground. Even though his fingers were scratched, his body was still stable. A smell of muddy water rushed towards her from the front. Before Lily could breathe a sigh of relief, a strong wind came from above, and two sounds of objects falling to the ground almost at the same time were heard. Several people fell from a high place, and the terrain was sloping. There seemed to be water flowing below. Although she did not hear the sound of the river flowing, the smell was very similar to the river that was blocked under the platform when she first came out of the secret passage. Lily felt that the person who had just fallen was about to face the river. He rolled away, forced his upper body up, and subconsciously stretched his legs to stop him. It didn't take long for the group of people to come in, and so many people died. Now I can save one of them naturally. Fortunately, the body was that of a woman. After hitting her leg, Lily's leg that was pressed on the ground slipped forward. It took a while, but at least the woman was petite and slightly lighter, so she finally stabilized. At the same time, another person who rolled down, Giliolo, hit her behind, until he hit her back vest with a plop sound. His hand subconsciously grasped her shoulders, forcing Lily to slide forward a long way, causing burning pain on her chest and chin, and the three of them stopped at the same time. Lily's back vest was already injured, but now she was hit again, and her internal organs seemed to be knocked out of place. She was so painful that she felt panicked, and she could no longer hold back the mouthful of blood that she had been holding tightly in her mouth. Unable to hold back, a puff sound came out, and the person who rolled down from behind fell on her and threw her to the ground. The person's heart was beating hard. After falling to the ground for a while, he stretched out his hands to grab her tightly. Lily was so pressed that she couldn't breathe, and stars were popping up in front of her eyes. She tried several times to lift the person off her back, but she was already injured before she fell. Now that she fell to the ground, all the bones in her body seemed to be broken. It was like being thrown to pieces, and then being pressed tightly by this person. There was not much magic power left in the body. I tried several times, but I couldn't summon the breath to lift this person away, so I had to open my mouth wide. Mouth gasping. Affected by what happened in the Bagua array just now, no one who fell down dared to speak anymore. It was pitch dark all around. Lily lay quietly with her mouth wide open and gasped, waiting for her strength to recover. The person who fell on her also, he kept panting, his chest pressed tightly against her back, and he made no move for a while. A rustling sound suddenly sounded, sometimes mixed with the subtle sound of gravel being stepped on. In this dark space, everyone's ears were undoubtedly much sharper than usual. Lily had originally escaped from the scene. The body that was relaxed after the Bagua formation suddenly became tense again as the sound sounded, as if something was coming towards the side. Although she relaxed her hands and feet, Lily still heard it in her ears. She subconsciously thought she threw the person behind her away, but the person lying on her back seemed to have heard the voice, and held her tightly, as if grasping a life-saving straw, unwilling to let go. Something was approaching her, and something like a hand stretched out. Lily subconsciously wanted to turn over, but there was someone on top of her. In addition, Her back vest was seriously injured, which made her heart broken every time she moved. The pain in her lungs was splitting. She tried all her strength, but she could barely hold herself up. Something cold like a finger poked her cheek. This time it hit the spot where Lily was scratched on the sand when she was hit. The wound hurt so much that she gritted her teeth. Although the hand was cold, it still seemed to be trembling. There was some yin qi on the fingers, but the yin qi was not too strong. Touching her wound did not make her wound worse. She thought it was not a ghost. Before Lily could breathe a sigh of relief, as if she was more relieved than she was, the other party suddenly reached out and slapped her cheek twice. There were two crisp sounds. Against the backdrop of the wounds on her back vest and cheeks, these two slaps were not too severe. It hurt, but it suddenly aroused the anger in her heart. Before she could free her hands to catch the person who dared to slap her, the other person cried and laughed. "Lance, Lance, come here quickly, there are living people here. There are living people here." There was a tremor of relief and excitement in her voice. As she shouted, she reached out and wanted to slap Lily on the face. "Are you okay? Are you still alive?" Lily turned her face away with difficulty. The body that had been lying on her back without moving suddenly seemed to go crazy when she heard the sound. The hand that was originally holding Lily's shoulders almost clasped into her flesh. Mrs. Wen's disbelieving voice also sounded. "Kanya, Kanya. Kanya, is it you? Is it you?" she asked several times. Before the girl could reply, she burst into tears. My daughter, my daughter, my daughter, I finally found you." At this moment, the person on her back spoke, and Lily realized that the person who had just fallen on her was Mrs. Wen. She was able to react immediately when she heard the girl's words, which proved that she was not injured when she fell. She fell unconscious, but she lay on her back for such a long time and couldn't get off. Lily felt an unknown fire in her heart, and she didn't know where the strength came from in her body. She put her hand on the ground and barely pushed herself up. Mrs. Wen became limp. Lying on her back, as if she was carrying him, Lily's other elbow suddenly bent, and hit Mrs. Wen's chest hard and hard. She acted out of anger. Mrs. Wen was still crying for her daughter. After being hit, she let out a painful wail. The hand that was originally holding Lily's shoulder retracted and she subconsciously covered her own breasts. Lily struggled to move her body out, and according to the feeling, she slapped her out and slapped Mrs. Wen's face with a snap, which made Mrs. Wen unable to make any sound on the spot. Mom, is that you?" When Kanya's trembling voice sounded, as if she was in disbelief. "You, why are you here?" To be continued. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 915. Mrs. Wen was slapped by Lily just now, and her cheeks were numb from the slap. She thought about the bitterness along the way. Her group of people narrowly escaped death and came to this place. Now they finally met their daughter and saved their lives. But her husband, Mr. Wen, threw his life on it and cried so hard that he couldn't breathe. When Kanya carefully stretched out her hand to her, she grabbed her daughter and held Wen tightly. Kanya started to cry. The mother and daughter finally met here, and they both started to cry. The cry broke the cold situation here. Lily struggled to sit up, and the girl holding her legs also crawled over and sat close to her. Beside her, her body was trembling and she was sobbing softly. "How many people are still alive?" Lily coughed twice to cough out the remaining congestion in her throat. She felt much more comfortable before asking again. "I still have this old bone." Tang Quan's gasping voice sounded, followed by the middle-aged fat man's voice. The rest of the voices were no longer heard. The coffin bearer in the Bagua array just now. There were 8 people in total, but 2 died, and only 6 people were able to lie down in the coffin. But now, including Mrs. Wen, only 5 were left alive. A total of 33 people came in, but only 5 survived. It was not time to leave the tomb yet, and the price of entering the ancient tomb this time was too high. The person who didn't speak was probably the tall and thin man. He hadn't made a sound at this time, so he was probably in danger. Lily remembered hearing the first sound of rolling into the river. It was probably the tall and thin man. She thought again. Coughed twice. Several people crawled towards her. While they were panting, a male voice suddenly spoke. "How did you survive?" The male voice spoke in very fluent Chinese with a slight nasal sound. In this darkness, it sounded like Wunong's soft words, like a lover's whisper ringing in my ears. It sounded very touching at first, but after listening carefully, there seemed to be an indescribable feeling. The speaker spoke Chinese very standardly. He spoke the tongue-curling and flat-tonguing parts as if they were in a textbook. Lily instinctively felt that something was not quite right. There was clearly something redundant here. The person was there, she could tell from his words, but she couldn't feel the presence of another creature here. In the darkness, Lily remembered the words when Kanya called out when she came over before, after she discovered Lily. She shouted the name Lance, and it was obvious that the man speaking at this time was the Lance she was talking about. Sure enough, as soon as the man finished speaking, Lily heard when Kanya ask, "Mom, how did you get in here?" Mrs. Wen finally found her daughter at this time, crying so hard that she couldn't breathe, as if she wanted to vent all the fright and fear she had suffered along the way. When Kanya asked, she didn't bother to answer at all. Everyone's vision was affected in the darkness. Even Lily felt that her eyes were pitch black and she couldn't see the scene here at all. I don't know if it was because this place was weird or because she was injured, Lance didn't seem to be affected by the darkness in any way. He even seemed to be used to this darkness. He only heard a burst of footsteps coming from far and near, and stood exactly where he was. When Kanya sighed, Lily felt as if a pair of hawk-like eyes were falling on her. It made her whole body tense up. "Okay, Mom, stop crying." "How did you get here?" When Kanya comforted Mrs. Wen several times. After coaxing her for a while, Mrs. Wen became quieter. Only then did he raise his previous question again. It's okay that she didn't mention this. As soon as she mentioned this, Mrs. Wen began to wipe away tears again. "Kanya, Kanya, your father is dead, your father is dead." Thinking of the previous scene in the Bagua array, Mrs. Wen's body began to tremble violently again. She thought of her husband's tragic situation before his death. The scene of her husband's eyeballs being pierced on the nails by that dry black and skinny twig-like hand, and the blood-stained eyeballs dangling, was still echoing in her mind, making her tremble all over when she thought about it. The two couples have been married for more than 20 years and have always been very loving. This time, in order to find their daughter, the couple sold their family property and went through a lot of effort to get into the ancient tomb. Mrs. Wen did not expect that this business would really work. There will be no return. One moment, she was holding her husband's hand and trying to pull him into the coffin. The next moment, her husband's palm became cold and he was killed by the thin black body. When she thought of this, Mrs. Wen cried so hard that she couldn't breathe. She hugged her daughter tightly, as if she had found a life-saving straw, and shouted heartbreakingly, "Husband, husband. Stop crying, lest you attract something here again." Her voice sounded like a demonic voice piercing her brain. Her voice echoed out, and a woman's shrill voice seemed to come back from all directions, "Husband, husband." Lily felt inexplicable. Then she remembered the scene when Mrs. Wen called her daughter after entering the ancient tomb. A bad feeling always came to her heart, and she couldn't help but scolded her. But Mrs. Wen was immersed in sadness, and Lily's words seemed like poking a hornet's nest. She was already very angry with Lily. She had lost her husband at this time, and she wanted to take care of him even if he cried twice. The more Mrs. Wen thought about it, the angrier he gets, the more he can't help but yell. What's wrong with me just wanting to cry? You've never killed a man, what do you know? Mrs. Ruoan said nothing else, but she mentioned Lily's pain point. Now Li Yangzi's whereabouts are still unknown. I don't know what happened in the starry sky that day. Although Lily guessed that he was not dead, after all this is just a guess. Mrs. When this unintentional remark touched the most pressing part of her heart. She was so angry that she pulled out a piece of talisman without thinking, go. The next moment Mrs. Wen wanted to speak again, the talisman flew out and turned into a strong wind, hitting her cheek like a slap in the face, so hard that she couldn't keep her body steady and was about to fall down. Fortunately, the sound of clothes fluttering came from the side. It should be the young man named Lance who caught her. Mrs. Wen thanked her in panic. Looking back, she guessed that it was Lily who almost fell down just now. It was a good thing, after all, she heard Lily shout go. Mrs. Wen couldn't bear it anymore. She just said a few words about Lily, but she hit him. Mrs. Wen was so angry that she couldn't help but cursed. You unqualified girl. You have a mother but not a mother. What's the matter with you? My husband was killed and I was not allowed to cry. If you hadn't led the way, could you have taken us to that dangerous place? Mrs. Wen was just angry at Lily for beating her at first. The more she talked now, the more she felt that it was all Lily's fault. If she hadn't led everyone to the iron rope, they met the ghost after crossing the mountain wall. If they hadn't entered the blood pool later and then entered the well under her instructions, how would everyone have ended up being forced to the bottom of the well? You don't know how to pretend to understand. It's a shame that we still trust you so much. You said that there would be nothing strange about the body under the well, but why did that thing suddenly wake up again? You don't know how to pretend to be fat because you don't have that diamond. Then don't take that porcelain job. If it weren't for your miscalculation, how could my husband die? So many people have died, and if you pay for their lives, you will not die well, you will go to hell. Mrs. Wen said. She cursed again and again, and her words made everyone fall silent. When Kanya heard that her father was dead, and heard her mother say this, she also glared in the direction where Lily had spoken before, and sobbed from her mouth. Tang Quan sighed. This has nothing to do with Xiaoun. This is also the first time she has entered this ancient tomb. Now that so many people have died, do you think it has nothing to do with her? When Mrs. Wen heard what Tang Quan said, she felt even more angry. Her husband died and these people were still shirking their responsibilities. She was angry in her heart. If she hadn't said that the body underneath would not wake up, why would we have listened to her and carried the coffin? It's because of her. Mrs. Wen said this, still a little annoyed. Since you are so capable, you can do it by yourself. Come on, don't come with us. If we hadn't listened to you, how could so many of us have died? They were all killed by you, it was you. It's not her. Lily sneered twice. Before she could speak, Zhao Hongxian, who had been sitting next to her and had never spoken, suddenly spoke quietly. Mrs. Wen sniffed. What do you know? It's you who did it, Mrs. Wen, please give my mother her life. Zhao Hongxian first sobbed softly, then seemed to go crazy and rushed towards Mrs. Wen's direction. You gave my mother her life because it was you who caused it, you scourge. Zhao Hongxian was so angry that she pounced on Mrs. Wen. The two people rolled into a ball in the darkness. Mrs. Wen was not prepared for Zhao Hongxian to take action, so she scratched her face. There was a sound of pain, and while pushing and beating Zhao Hongxian, he shouted, "Are you crazy? I didn't kill your mother, what are you doing? Why isn't it you? At the well, when Yang Lily's body was asking for your life, you waved your hand in a panic and scratched my mother's face. It must be because of this that you brought the corpse to life." Corpse, Lily Yun said, as long as there is the smell of blood, The corpse will be brought back to life. It was you who did it? My mother thought that the wound was small and it was not a problem, but why didn't the corpse move before? My mother dug the corpse at the bottom of the well. The body came alive? Did you do it? Was it you? Do you think it was you? You killed your husband, killed my mother, you killed so many people, please pay for your life, pay for your life. Zhao Hongxian shouted, and slapped Mrs. Wen's face like crazy. Mrs. Wen didn't expect this to happen at first, and she was shocked. To be continued. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Wan Erwr. Chapter 916. Mrs. Wen did not expect that it was herself who brought the corpse to life and killed her husband, Mr. Wen. Zhao Hongxian's words reminded her that she had indeed grabbed the middle-aged woman named Mu when the bloody corpse appeared. She didn't cry out in pain at that time, so Mrs. Wen naturally didn't take it seriously, thinking about a few small wounds. At that critical moment, she was so frightened by the bloody corpse that appeared inexplicably. How could she pay attention to Mu again? Was the lady's face scratched? But he didn't expect that his unintentional move would cause so many people to die, including his husband. Thinking of this, Mrs. Wen's whole body became paralyzed. She felt guilty, regretful, and afraid. All kinds of feelings came to her heart. She allowed Zhao Hongxian to grab her and beat her. She was trembling all over and could no longer afford it. Mouth. Humph, it's so shameless for a thief to shout about catching a thief, the fat middle-aged man snorted coldly, and Mrs. Wen didn't dare to say anything. Wen Qingye didn't know what was going on, and asked for Yang Lily's body to claim her mother's life. She couldn't understand why her mother scratched someone else's mother's face, etc., but she probably understood that her mother's profession was in great danger. Although the pain of her father's death was still there, but now she saw after her mother was beaten, Wen Qingye couldn't stand there in a daze, so she hurriedly stepped forward to pull the two people apart. Okay, can you talk to me if you have something to say? My mother is also an elder after all. Can you respect her a little? What's more, my father is also dead. Zhao Hongxian was pulled by her, but she was still unwilling to kick Mrs. Wen's feet again. When she heard Wen Qingye's words, she shouted. Your father deserved to die? He was a sinister man who tricked the rest of us into entering the ancient tomb and killed so many people. Even if he doesn't die, I will kill him if he gets out. Everyone who survived thought like Zhao Hongxian, but her words made Wen Qingye a little unhappy, but Lily felt that something was wrong. Before she could tell these people to stop making trouble, suddenly in the dark underground, several green fires slowly ignited from above the dark river. Give me a papaya and repay you with Qian Yao. Bandits repay you. You will always think it is good. Give me peach and repay you with Qian Yao. Bandits repay you with Qian Yao. A woman sang softly, inexplicably, it began to appear in everyone's ears. The papaya chapter in the Book of Songs, which probably few people knew about, was sung a cappella by her in Wunong's soft-spoken tune, and echoes echoed around her. If you listen to it from another place, this woman's voice is quiet and gentle. The woman's gentleness and shyness are vividly expressed, which is very pleasant. The echo is like the icing on the cake, making the woman's singing more and more attractive. However, when everyone hears the singing, the hair on their backs can't help but stand up. Stand up. In this ancient tomb, under the coffin was the black and skinny emperor's corpse. A woman appeared inexplicably singing the Book of Songs, and she sang such a ditty expressing affection, which inevitably made people feel creepy. Lily only heard the two people sitting next to her swallowing subconsciously. The middle-aged fat man even shivered all over and squeezed towards her, obviously treating her as a protective umbrella. He had torn her apart before. Zhao Hongxian, who was hitting Mrs. Wen, also crawled back, clinging to Lily, reaching out to grab her hand, her body shaking like a leaf falling in the autumn wind. The teeth began to click together. It was originally so dark that no light could be seen in the underground river. Several groups of firelight slowly surged up from the bottom of the river, swaying gently. In a short time, under the lamp, you could vaguely see a few dark and charming lotus petals supporting these green firelights. Swinging on the black river surface, in the thick fog. Under the light of the fire, a small wooden boat that could only accommodate 2 people sitting side by side swung out. A beautiful woman wearing a red dress with long black hair, her back facing everyone, sat on the boat, singing. The sound of papaya came from her mouth. Throw me a tree and plum, and repay it with a jade. It's always good to be repaid by a bandit. She didn't turn around while sitting on the boat, and she was still singing this song softly. It was clearly an expression of the poem of friendship was sung with emotion by her, and her voice was gentle and low. With this green light, everyone could see clearly that this was a river about 10 feet wide. I don't know if it was because of the darkness underground. The river was black, and they didn't know how deep it was. It was like stagnant water. The woman it appeared suddenly, and the song sounded suddenly. The lotus lantern appeared out of thin air on the river, and so did the boat. There was no wind around, but the boat rippled out on the river, and the lotus lantern followed the movement of the hull. It began to move slowly. The woman in red turned her back to everyone and looked over from a distance. Her figure seemed to be enveloped in a faint black mist. The long black hair hanging down her back seemed to come alive, flying gently with the movement of the ship's hull. This scene made everyone's hearts tighten. Wenkanya also swallowed. It's strange, we've been here for 2 days and we haven't seen anyone here under the green light. Lily could clearly see Wenkanya's fair and clean face. She was wearing a pair of wear-resistant jeans and stepped on her feet. Wearing sneakers, a white t-shirt on the upper body, and a denim jacket of the same color as the pants on the outside. He carried a backpack on his body and tied his hair into a ponytail. Although there was some dust on his hair, it was the same as the hair that had just been lifted from the top of his head. Compared to the few people who rolled down from the bottom of the coffin, she was still relatively clean and her clothes were intact. This showed that even though she claimed to have been here for 2 days, she had not suffered much. It was the scorching sun outside, but when she came to the cemetery, she wore an autumn jacket, which proved that she was well prepared. Lily glanced at Wenkanya from the corner of her eye, and her eyes quickly fell on a man standing next to her. On a man wearing a black shirt and casual trousers of the same color. The man was tall and thin. Perhaps because he heard the singing, he subconsciously turned his head to look at the middle of the river. In the light of the fire on the river, Lily saw his deep facial features that were obviously different from those of the Chinese people, as well as his deep facial features in the darkness. His skin was so white that it seemed to be able to shine, his hair was pale gold in the light, and his eyes were green. He turned out to be a foreigner with an exquisite appearance that was almost male and female. When Wenkanya called him Lance just now, Lily, I didn't think about foreigners at all. Although this person's tone of voice was a bit strange, his words were smooth and did not have any foreign accent. You must know that foreigners, no matter how well they learn Chinese, are born with. There is no way to change the characteristics of the person, but even though this Lance only said a short sentence, Lily didn't hear that he was not from China, and she was a little surprised to see it now. But then something more surprising happened to Lily. After Wenkanya, who was standing next to Lance, saw something strange suddenly appeared on the other side of the river, she jumped up, waved her hands and shouted, "Hey, come here, there's danger in the river." Lily's eyes almost rolled out of their sockets. She thought that Mrs. Wen was already the most stupid among fools. She didn't expect that Wenkanya could be better than Blue, not to mention far better than Blue. In this weird cemetery, the red clothes and the appearance of the woman with the hair was strange, and even a fool could see that there was something wrong with it, but she waved her hand to the woman opposite and told her to come over quickly. There are some things that you can't just attack casually. If you do it, you will get into trouble even if you want to drive it away. According to what Wenkanya said, she went to the cemetery for 2 days, and she was still alive in these 2 days with her IQ. Which really surprised Lily. It should be the young man named Lance beside her who protected her very well, otherwise such a woman might not survive even a quarter of an hour after entering the ancient tomb. Thinking of this, Lily sneered twice and called Zhao Hongxian, "Hold me farther away." At this moment, she suddenly spoke. Zhao Hongxian was originally frightened by the inexplicable appearance of the woman in red. When she heard Lily speak, she subconsciously looked back at her. Her eyes were still reflecting the green firelight. The fear, anxiety, and suspicion were very obvious. Lily sneered. "I want to stay away from the idiot to avoid being infected by her and lowering my IQ." Hearing this, although Zhao Hongxian and others were frightened by this inexplicable appearance of the woman, after Lily finished speaking, they couldn't help but have a look of laughter on their faces. The originally tense atmosphere was filled with laughter because of what Lily said. They all relaxed involuntarily. Several people responded. Zhao Hongxian struggled to hold up her body, and together with Tang Quan, they supported Lily to stand up. The middle-aged fat man also followed closely beside Lily. As expected, the few people retreated. About 10 steps behind. When Kanya's pretty face turned pale with anger, but Mrs. Wen on the side subconsciously grabbed her daughter. When she saw Lily really took a few steps back, she felt a little nervous. Although Mrs. Wen didn't like Lily during this journey, she could honestly say that she saw Lily's ability and was quite dependent on Lily's strength. What's more, no matter how stupid she was, she still didn't believe that there was anyone in the world. There were rumors of ghosts and gods, but what happened along the way into the ancient tomb had already overturned her previous understanding, especially the fact that her husband died at the hands of the zombie in the Bagua array, which made her even more confused. I also believe that there are indeed ghosts and monsters in this world. In comparison, she was a little more vigilant than Wenkanya. When she saw this woman in red clothes and long hair appearing, she shivered all over and felt a little scared. She had seen ghosts and knew what was going on. Seeing Lily sitting so far away, she had offended Lily before. If something really happened and Lily didn't save their mother's life, it would be bad. So Mrs. Wen dragged her daughter and shouted, "Kanya, Kanya, we're not that big of a match, let's sit over there too." To be continued. Carrot. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan Erwr. Chapter 917. Mom, you don't know, this river is very dangerous. Lance has said that there are weird things in the river. If I see someone in this dangerous place, how can I not warn them? When Kanya looked confused. Seriously, I didn't expect my mother to agree with what Lily said at this moment. She frowned. You and Dad have taught me since I was a child that if you are poor, you can be alone, and if you are rich, you can help the world. Before she could finish her words, Lily rolled her eyes. IQ is really touching, please help me further. Zhao Hongxian and Tang Quan responded, and sure enough, they helped her up and stepped back 7 or 8 steps. When Kanya gritted her teeth and was about to speak when a soft voice rang out. Give me a papaya and repay you with a jade. It's always good to be rewarded by a bandit. The word "yeah" was drawn out thinly and long, and the sound lingered for a long time, as if the sugar threads were melted and pulled apart. Later, when I heard it, the sound that sounded like silk and bamboo gradually became a bit sharp, which made people feel cold on the soles of my feet. At first, the sound was heard on the other side of the river, about tens of meters away from everyone, but now the sound seemed to be not far away from everyone. When Kanya subconsciously looked up and saw only the sound that was there before. The boat, the woman, and the lotus lantern in the black mist appeared in the middle of the river in the blink of an eye. She didn't move much, but she was moving extremely fast. At this time, she was approaching them. The surface of the river was as calm as stagnant water, without any ripples. Getting closer, everyone saw the green fire reflecting the strange black lotus. The woman in red had long hair as black as vines. The woman's body seemed to be automatically covered by the waterfall like windless thick black hair. As if wrapped in it, black mist rippled all around. As the boat got closer and closer, everyone felt an inexplicable cold wind blowing from the ground, and they all shivered subconsciously. There was obviously no wind on the river, but as soon as this woman approached, it was clear that there was no wind. The wind came, Lily leaned on Zhao Hongsheng and sneered, but Zhao Hongsheng, Tang Quan, and others looked at each other with horror in their eyes. For ordinary people, it only feels cold. But to the Taoist priest, this air conditioning is nothing, it is clearly the extremely negative and heavy evil spirit. Wen Qingye hadn't felt it yet, but the face of the man named Lance beside her suddenly became serious. He reached out and grabbed Wen Qingye's hand, dragged her and Mrs. Wen and ran towards Lily. But the woman's voice still lingers. Give me a wooden peach and give me Qianyao in return. Banditry repays me. I always think it's good. Yes, 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 the voice was singing the book of songs in the Urba Sutra at first, but later on it changed its tune. The cadence of yes sounded soft at first, but later it sounded like a handful of songs. The saw was cutting through trees, sharp and high, when it fell into everyone's ears. It was like a demonic sound piercing the ears, making people want to vomit after hearing it. Throw me a tree and a plum, and repay me with a jade. It's always good to be repaid by a bandit, the woman shouted yeah yeah a few times in a high voice, and then started to read the poem again. The man named Lance, the man didn't say a word and rushed directly towards Lily and others. He is tall, has very long legs, and has an indistinguishable appearance, but unexpectedly, he is not an embroidered pillow. I also have strength in my hands. Carrying Wen Qingye and Mrs. Wen seemed not to feel the weight. Although Lily asked Zhao Hongsheng and others to help her get up from the beginning, they were all frightened and fell down again. He was somewhat injured and took a dozen steps back. But the steps were not big. Lance caught up with Lily and others in a few steps, and the woman's voice followed them like a ghost. Give me a papaya and give me a jade. The voice began to recite the book of songs again and again. At this time, no matter how stupid Wen Qingye was, she realized something was wrong. What's going on? Why did the lady leave? Didn't you call the slave family to come over? Why did you leave so quickly when you saw the slave family now? The resentful voice no longer read poetry this time, but instead sighed and asked softly. You are leaving in such a hurry, but where are you going? I'll give you a ride. This place is deserted. Have you eaten yet? Everyone heard the sound getting closer and closer, but they didn't dare to look back. The yin energy was heavier than before. Suddenly, there was a clang sound, and something was thrown in front of everyone, surrounded by green lights. The fire was getting brighter and brighter. Apparently, as the woman approached, the black lotus lanterns that seemed to be fixed around her also appeared in front of everyone. Several people looked intently at the things she threw over, and one eye saw them. The old thick bowl contained a large bowl of rice soaked in water. At this moment, she threw it in front of everyone. The bowl fell to the ground and kept swaying. The water inside also swayed. In a daze, the dim in the light, it seemed as if the rice came to life, as if it was constantly squirming in the bowl. Eat, eat, eat enough, so you can go on the road. He 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 he. The woman's voice followed the crowd not far away. Zhao Hongsheng's scalp was numb, and she reached out to grab Lily's arm. His face was so pale that his body was shaking slightly. Why don't you eat? A few people just walked forward quickly, and after only taking a few steps, the bowl would always appear in front of everyone, but Lily and others always refused to eat. The woman seemed a little unhappy, and her voice became darker. Is it because you think the slave's reception is not good enough? Everyone, please walk slower, there are some good things here. After she finished speaking, she heard a bang sound again. She might have thrown something out. Repay me with wooden peaches, and repay me with Kayan Yao. To repay a bandit, I will always think it's good. She started singing the little song from before again, and this time she threw a lot of it in front of Lily and the others. Something dark. The slave family has surrendered to Kayan Yao. If you don't do anything in return. After she finished speaking, she paused, and the sound of tick-tick water sounded, as if someone climbed up from the river. The water around her began to drip down. Lily gritted her teeth, and there was only a little left in her body. The Daoli started to wander crazily. When Kanya heard the question and asked subconsciously, "What will you do if you can't repay it?" "If there is no repayment, all the ladies will stay and accompany me." The voice seemed to be heard behind everyone, and then after the woman said this, she opened her mouth and smiled. Got up. The next moment, a pile of cold, greasy, dark things silently circled up, carrying a fishy smell, like the smell of a smelly ditch. Zhao Hongxian next to Lily screamed, and a pile of things around her waist. Something black was wrapped around her, and now she looked at Lily's face, showing a look of despair, fear, and pleading. At the same time, another jet black and slender thing surged towards Lily, as if these jet black things were still alive. Tang Quan and others were trying to hide, and the middle-aged fat man let out a scream. Er had long forgotten that he was also an Onmyoji sorcerer. Lily forcefully took a sip of spiritual energy and drank loudly. Heaven and earth are infinite, the universe is orderly, yin and yang have their own way. Heaven and earth borrow the law, punish them. She chanted the incantation in her mouth, and the mana in her body began to move slowly with her incantation. The magic that originally wanted to wrap around her wrist the moment the thing touched her body, it suddenly retracted quickly as if it had been burned. The woman who had been giggling before let out a sharp and shrill scream. Instead of the gentleness before, it became a bit resentful and gloomy. "Ah, it hurts." While talking, everyone was forced to a corner. There was a river embankment not far ahead. They could no longer run. If they went down, they would reach the dark river surface. Several people were forced to retreat and had no choice but to hold on. The scalp turned around, and when he turned around, he saw that the woman in red, who was still in the middle of the river, sitting in the boat, was now floating on the shore only 7 or 8 steps away from the group, following closely behind them. The woman still maintained the posture of sitting with her back to everyone, but when viewed up close, her hair looked like seaweed. It was spread all over the surface of the boat and was slowly squirming along the side of the boat, with some hair falling out. It fell into the water and merged with the water. The woman shouted that it hurts. The next moment, her long hair rushed towards Lily again. Apparently she was still unwilling to give up. Several strands of her hair were wrapped around Zhao Hongxian, Wen Kanya, and others. Wen Kanya's mouth they screamed in surprise, and the hair pulled them and tried to drag them into the river. Zhao Hongxian let out a desperate cry. Yun Lily save me, I don't want to die." On the contrary, the young man named Lance was extremely steady. He was dragged by the hair at this moment, but he did not move at all. Instead, he became fierce and reached out to grab a strand of Wen Kanya's hair. With a strong tug on the black hair on his body, the thick and strong snake-like hair was actually torn off by him. I don't know if the hair was soaked in water, but when it was torn off, a lot of water dripped out from the middle. Lance followed suit and tore off the hair that was wrapped around his own. Zhao Hongxian had already been dragged out of the 2 rooms. 3 steps away, Lily looked at the woman sitting on the boat with her back to everyone, and she pressed the 5 thunder curse. Roll. There was a loud bang. When the thunder flashed, the power of Taoism cut through the thick fog beside the woman. Thunder is the natural nemesis of these ghosts. When the woman heard the thunder, she let out a scream, and the boat she was originally sitting on left. She was very close to Lily and the others, so when the 5 thunder curse hit her, it was too late for her to avoid it even if she wanted to. She let out a shrill scream and quickly retracted Zhao Hongsheng's hair. Zit-size electric currents were rushing around her body, and she let out a ghostly cry. It hurts, it hurts. To save the slave family, the female Taoist priest is so generous. To be continued. Canon Fodder Strategy. Author, Wan Erwr. Chapter 918. When the 5 thunder curse was blasted out, the thick fog that originally shrouded the woman's body exploded. Only then did everyone see clearly the true face of the woman sitting on the boat, and they all involuntarily took a breath of cold air. How could this person be wearing a dress? The back view of the woman in red clothes with long hair is clearly the scene where the woman is facing them. Under the lightning, every detail on her body was revealed. What everyone thought was thick and long hair was actually thin and long black worms. At this time, they were burrowing into her cheeks, which were so riddled with holes that they could no longer see her appearance. When she got in, a large number of long black worms were squirming in her mouth, nostrils, and eyes, and her cheeks were all covered with such worms. Just now, in the thick fog, everyone could not see clearly, but they thought they were her hair. She was not wearing red clothes either. Wherever the insect went, strands of bright red blood kept pouring down from her head, soaking the clothes she was wearing, so the clothes she was wearing looked bright red. At this moment, the woman fell on the boat and screamed. She opened her mouth wide, and the big worms were getting more and more in her mouth. She was a little afraid of Lily's 5 thunder curse. At this moment, obviously wanting to escape, she took back the hair that was originally tied to Zhao Hongsheng's body. She quickly wanted to get into the river, but Lily stepped forward, endured the pain in her chest, and blocked her move to go into the river. Zhao Hongsheng, who was dragged straight to the river, was pulled back and caught the slippery and disgusting long worm. Once the bugs that originally dug into flesh were caught by Lily and restrained by Dao power, they were like snakes pinched 7 inches. They struggled desperately, but just couldn't escape. These bugs were trying to escape. In her palm, the body continued to lengthen and become thinner, and some of it became like hair. The appearance of this thing was smooth, like a loach. He dug in whenever he saw a crack, and within a short time Lily had a palm wrapped around his fingers. Others felt horrified when they saw such a scene, but Lily thanked the Southern Territory for the gift of goo. She has seen all kinds of goo bugs, and there are bugs that are more disgusting than this one, so her expression does not change. On the contrary, in order to prevent these bugs that eat corpses and survive with yin qi and become sperm after years of escaping, she removes the bodies of these bugs. He twisted it around twice in his palm like a rope, snorted, and tried to drag the female ghost to the shore. The body of the female ghost in red quickly submerged into the river and tried to escape. It was just that her hair was being pulled at this moment, and she wanted to escape but couldn't. She panicked and let out a sharp cry. In an instant, the originally calm lake suddenly became violently windy, and layers of water spread out on the surface of the lake. There were layer upon layer of ripples, and soon something pitch black emerged from the center of the lake and moved toward the shore. Mrs. Wen. Help me, I'm in so much pain. A hoarse male voice rang out. He climbed up from the edge of the lake, dragging a long trail of water on the ground, and there were many of these things that Lily had dragged on him. Insects were burrowing in here and there, and although its face looked completely different at this moment, and it was unrecognizable to its original appearance, when he heard his voice, the body of the fat middle-aged man shook like fallen leaves in the autumn wind, and his teeth rattled. Sound. Even the sound is a little unsmooth. Bo. Yes, it's you, Bo Tang Quan added, with a sad look on his pale and thin old face. This young man who shouted that he was in so much pain had encountered a snake in the secret passage before and rushed into the lake in a panic. The first one shouted that there were insects. The young man who ended up disappearing. Although everyone had already guessed that something bad might have happened to him, they really saw him turn into a ghost and seek his life at this moment. Tang Quan and the plump middle-aged man still felt a bit sad that the rabbit had died and the fox had died. "It's so cold, so cold." Another girl started to shout, and followed the ghost named Yubo and started to crawl to the shore. However, these things seemed to be restrained by the lake surface, and they could not crawl out for more than a month. He stopped where he was when he was only a few meters away. He just waved to everyone and asked them to save him. A figure who finally climbed ashore was spinning on the ground in pain. He lay on the ground, and black bugs came out of his back. At first glance, it looked like there were many long black hairs on his back. He pressed hard with one hand. On the ground, he shouted woo-woo. "Mrs. Wen, you must not die well, you must not die well." These cries, combined with the sinister atmosphere around them, made Mrs. Devon's body tremble and tremble. She clutched Lance's arm and screamed. "It's none of my business, it's none of my business." She looked too excited. Lance looked thin, but before he could grab those black bugs, it was obvious that this young man was not like him. He looked so polite and courteous on the outside, but he was a little embarrassed by Mrs. Wen at this moment. His cheeks showed a bit of forbearance, his eyes flashed red, his cheek muscles twitched twice, and finally, still seeming to have endured Mrs. Wen's actions, she grabbed Mrs. Wen's clothes and was about to throw her away when Mrs. Wen let out an earth-shattering scream. She threw her hands up like crazy. "Go away, go away." At some point, she held a white bone palm stained with black water in her palm. At this time, the handle of the palm clasped Mrs. Wen's palm. It looked as if Mrs. Wen and the white bone palm were clasped hand in hand. This thing held hands. It was so tight that no matter how hard Mrs. Wen shook it off, she couldn't shake it off. She cried until she had snot and tears, her body was trembling and she was holding on to Lance, as if she was treating him as a life-saving straw. Lance endured and endured. Mrs. Wen's voice screamed louder than the female ghost in the lake who wanted to escape but couldn't because her hair was pulled. Lance's forehead veins jumped and he comforted her several times. "Mrs. Wen, please calm down," he said several times in succession, and his expression was already a little impatient. However, Mrs. Wen not only failed to calm down, she almost fell into a hysterical state. She cried and screamed. Snot and tears rolled down, the bone-white palm in her hand seemed to have roots with her, and she couldn't take it off. When Lance couldn't bear it anymore, everyone also had a headache due to Mrs. Wen's noisy. Lily pulled out a talisman on the paper, he dipped his fingers into some cinnabar and drew a few strokes on it. After lighting it with Taoist magic, he stuffed it into Mrs. Wen's mouth. The sound of flesh being burnt could not help but be heard, and the smell of roasted meat could even be heard from all around. As soon as the talisman was put into Mrs. Wen's mouth, she immediately opened her mouth wide and could no longer utter any words. When the voice came, only a pair of big eyes stared with a look of despair and horror. The whole world suddenly seemed to be quiet. Seeing this scene, the ghosts in the river seemed to be stunned. They forgot to plead and let their hair be pulled by Lily. For a moment, they almost forgot how to escape. "Go back to the river. If you keep making noises, I'll give you this bowl of rice soaked in water." Lily coughed twice, feeling bored by the noise, and shouted sharply at Mrs. Wen, and pointed to the bowl of rice soaked in water on the ground. At this moment, under the illumination of will-o'-the-wisps, everyone saw what looked like white rice in the rough sea bowl. In fact, upon closer inspection, there were white maggots squirming in and out of the bowl. Mrs. Wen listened. When Lily threatened to pour this thing into her mouth, she immediately shook her head desperately. "Just push her into the river and keep her company with the female ghost." The middle-aged fat man was also upset by the noise. Everyone was suddenly angry. They were originally afraid of ghosts appearing here because of Mrs. Wen's crying behavior. All the fear, tension, and panic in her heart burst out. As soon as the middle-aged fat man put forward his suggestion, Mrs. Wen shook her head like a wave, tears splashed everywhere in her eyes, and she held Lance tighter. "How dare you? Why do you hurt my mother?" Wen Kanya, who was so frightened that her face turned pale when she heard this, stepped forward quickly. Lily sneered. "Don't worry, we won't hurt her, and if she is destined to survive in this tomb, we will be happy to do so. She owes everyone so much money, and letting her die so easily is really an advantage to her." Mrs. Wen and her husband deceived a group of people into entering the ancient tomb to search for her daughter, causing so many people to die tragically. They only allowed these two couples to die here, so a large sum of money was lost. She really took advantage of it. The original owner was still waiting to redeem his father with money after returning, and Lily also wanted to ask Mrs. Wen to pay for her. Whether she borrowed it or sold herself to pay off the debt, Lily never thought of letting her. She died easily. It's just that she won't go out of her way to save Mrs. Wen in the ancient tomb, but if Mrs. Wen is very lucky to survive, Lily will not kill her. Instead of letting her die like this, it would be better to let her suffer all kinds of torture and spend the rest of her life in pain. When the plump middle-aged man heard this, he also let out a bitter poof sound. Mrs. Wen's face showed a look of guilt and fear. The white bones in her hands grabbed her very tightly. She wanted to shake her off, but for some reason she couldn't do it, and she couldn't scream anymore. She had to hold her daughter tightly with one hand, and she didn't dare to put the other hand in front of her. She just held it from a distance, and tears flowed out again. After Lily dealt with Mrs. Wen, she bit her index finger and drew a blood curse in the air. The moment she bit her index finger, Lance on the side seemed to be greatly frightened. He instinctively grabbed Wen Kanya and took a big step back. He looked very calm just now, and when the female ghost appeared, he didn't showing some fear. At this moment, Lily made such a big noise because of her actions. Tang Quan frowned and glanced at him. Lily was also suspicious. Lance quickly realized that his actions just now attracted everyone's attention, and he forcibly paused. He stopped, but a flash of blood flashed quickly in his eyes, and the veins on his cheeks popped out. His skin was snow white, which was especially obvious when the veins jumped, but everyone's attention fell on the river. On the female ghost and Lily, no one noticed him. The fright in his eyes quickly turned to greed, and his Adam's apple rolled slightly. A pair of eyelids quickly drooped to block the vigilance in his eyes, and he stretched out his hand to hold Wen Qin tightly. Yeah, held on tighter. To be continued. Canon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 919. The heaven and earth are infinite, the universe is orderly. Lily remembered Lance's movement in her heart, and couldn't help but become more cautious. As she chanted, the Taoist magic in her hand quickly formed a seal, and the insect that could originally be stretched and shortened suddenly the child could no longer transform. The female ghost in the river screamed, and her body suddenly stretched out. Her legs were still dripping in the river and she could not come over, but her soul was dragged out by 2 or 3 feet, and her head was immediately grabbed. In front of Lily, this scene seemed very scary, but its ghost was extremely hurt by it. At this time, even its appearance seemed a little hollow. She screamed and wailed, feeling the power of the Taoist skills in Lily's hands. Shocked, he hurriedly shouted, "Spare your life, female Taoist master, I don't dare anymore, I don't dare anymore." A large amount of black sewage poured out of her wormy eyes. She was obviously so scared that she cried. Her face was riddled with holes. The face looked even more terrifying when viewed up close. Zhao Hongsheng and others were so frightened that their whole bodies became cold and they could not stand steadily. But Lily had never seen anything during her mission. When she saw her appearance, She didn't even move her eyebrows. She just frowned, and the bugs she held in her hands wormed around in her palms. Gods return to temples, ghosts return to graves, and demons and ghosts enter the mountains and forests. When you come out to harm people, you should think of being harmed by others. This female ghost did not expect to be so fierce when she appeared, but she turned out to be so timid and only suffered 5 thunder blows. Curse, I was afraid that it would be like this. In fact, Lily's body has almost completely consumed all the magic power at this time, but it can't be seen on the surface. Now the female ghost begs for mercy, and Lily is naturally happy to save some magic power and scatters the newly formed Taoist skills. Go. When the female ghost saw that Lily had dispelled her Taoist skills, she soon did not dare to show her scary look again, and she screamed. The originally dark cheeks gradually turned pale and returned to the scene before her death. She was no longer wearing a red dress with her long hair hanging loose. Wearing a white shroud, except for those dark eyes that were a little piercing, it reminded people of her terrifying appearance a few minutes ago. The female ghost at this time seemed to be completely different from the previous female ghost in red. The female Taoist priest has learned that the slave family can neither return to the temple nor the tomb. They have been trapped in this tomb for 800 years. After she finished speaking, she glanced at Lily timidly. Please forgive me, the female Taoist master, I will never dare to do it again. She was anxious to go back into the river to save her life, but her soul was grabbed by Lily and couldn't escape at all, but Lily shook her head. He glanced not far away. Don't worry, you have survived here for such a long time. Are there any other ghosts in the river? Lily asked. When the people around saw this scene, they were shocked and frightened. Seeing Lily talking to the ghost, everyone was extremely scared. Stay away. The female ghost also wanted to hide, but her life gate was caught. She had no choice but to escape. There was a look of resignation on her face, and she answered tremblingly. Besides these few, there is nothing else. When she said this, a sense of sadness came up in her heart involuntarily. She has stayed here for 800 years. When the tomb was first built, she was sealed here and was not allowed to return. Although there was plenty of resentment here, it can keep her spirit alive. However, no one has entered this ancient tomb in 800 years. Otherwise, if there were many people who died here, and if there were many soldiers and generals under her, how could she be caught by Lily after just one encounter? The first time he showed up, he was ready to pull someone into the river, but he didn't expect that his men failed. Instead, he was caught. What is the origin of this cemetery? Since you have been here for such a long time, tell me. From the corner of Lily's eyes, she saw everyone retreating far away. The young man named Lance also arrested Wen's mother. The woman stood in the corner, her head lowered, her deep facial features cast into patches of shadow under the light, as if she hadn't looked this way. For some reason, Lily was very wary of this young man named Lance. This young man did not appear in the plot, and she had never even heard of it in Lily Yun's memory. She did not know if the original owner had met him later, but it was a pity that the plot she was interrupted by the man named Sun Yang, so that Lily only accepted half of it. Lily still believed in her sixth sense. She always felt that this young man had an indescribable feeling, which was very dangerous. Even the sense of danger was not inferior to that of the Corpse King in the Bagua array before. The female ghost appeared at the perfect time. Lily caught her at this moment, and everyone's attention would only be on the female ghost. By asking for information from the female ghost, she understood the cemetery clearly, and he desperately drove the spiritual power to circulate in his body, trying to buy more time to regain his strength. Female Taoist Master, this cemetery is the spiritual center of Cao Lan, the former Emperor Xiao of the Wei Kingdom. The slave family. The female ghost was caught by Lily. Listening to her question, she had no choice but to tell everything she knew. This cemetery is the tomb of Emperor Xiao of Wei State. Lily guessed it correctly before. Judging from the feng shui here, this cemetery is not affordable for ordinary people. There is a green dragon guarding the tomb, and there is water. This is obviously a treasure land with excellent feng shui. But for some unknown reason, the person who built the tomb cleverly used the 5 elements and Bagua array to create a place where spiritual energy and yin energy merge. This place is beneficial to the descendants of the cemetery, and the spiritual energy can benefit the corpses buried in the tomb. If the tomb owner here has a trace of his soul and is nourished by this spiritual energy for many years, he may one day be able to cultivate into a ghost immortal. But the paradox is that in addition to the spiritual energy, this place also has a trace of yin energy and a large amount of nutrients. The corpse's resentment is there, and these things are beneficial to the corpse. The corpse buried in the tomb is nourished by these 2 qi, and then worshipped with blood and qi. Over time, the corpse will surely rise. The 2 methods were originally contradictory, but the person who arranged the cemetery was an expert. He merged these 2 completely opposite fortunes and created such a set of ancient tombs that nourished both the soul and the body. Lily's brows very tightly wrinkled. Could it be that the person who built the tomb had some desire to live forever? Spiritual energy nourishes the soul, and resentment and yin energy nourish the corpse. If the corpse rises, it can become a zombie. If the soul remains, once it is nourished and strong, it will be locked in the corpse. As time goes by, it is impossible to say that it will reopen one day. It is not impossible to be intelligent and even resurrect as a zombie. The female ghost had a look of shock on her face when she heard Lily's words. The people around her were confused, but they didn't dare to speak out. The female Taoist master is indeed an expert. The female ghost bowed down ying at this time. Her head was still held in Lily's palm and she could not move, but her body was pressed into the river and could not be separated. At this moment, the lower body's move of bowing down seemed extremely it was weird, but she didn't notice it herself. The people around her didn't dare to look anymore and turned their heads away, but there were tears in her own eyes. Cao Lan was infatuated with the art of immortality and dreamed of immortality before his death. The ghost's resentful voice rang in the cemetery. Emperor Xiao of the Wei state wanted to live forever. When he was still alive, he sent alchemists to search for the art of immortality, but he couldn't find it anywhere. Unexpectedly, in his later years, a young Taoist priest recommended himself to the palace. At first, Cao Lan didn't believe this man when he saw how young he was. After all, he had met countless Taoists and alchemists in his life who claimed to be so-called masters. But this young man was different. He did have the ability, and for some reason, Cao Lan was impressed by what he said and believed in him. In his later years, Cao Lan did not even care about national affairs. He spent nearly 10 years building this cemetery and used 1,000 boys and girls each to drain blood to nourish the blood pool. Many virgins who found the 4 yin bodies born in the yin year, yin month, yin day, and yin time gathered together to create such a cemetery. After Cao Lan died, he was buried in a tomb. This was nearly 1,000 years. This female ghost in the river used to be a woman with the body of the 4 yins. She was thrown into the river alive to feed these corpse-eating insects and died of pain. She was trapped in the tomb for 800 years. It was isolated from the underworld. She could not be reincarnated after death, and she could not find a substitute. Because her body sank at the bottom of the river and died in the river, it had been with the corpse-eating insects in the river for hundreds of years. They became one and could not stray too far from the river. They had been wandering like this for many years. When she told her story, her voice was filled with resentment. Several people who were a little afraid of her at first couldn't help but relax when they heard what she had experienced. While everyone was silent, Wen Kanya's voice suddenly rang out. "Oh, I can't help you. I didn't expect you to die so miserably." She completely forgot about being almost dragged into the river by the female ghost before, and now she felt some sympathy for the ghost. Beauties always have bad luck. When Kanya made such a concluding sentence, and Lily sneered when she heard it. Who told you that beauties always have bad luck? It was okay for Lily to be disrespectful to her mother several times before. Later, she mistakenly believed that the female ghost was a human being, and when she gave her a few words of advice, Lily also said that she had a problem with her IQ. When Kanya now said it again when she answered, I felt extremely unhappy and retorted without thinking. Who else do I need to tell me? There are many such examples in history books. If you are not literate, you can read more and improve your literacy. After she finished speaking, she raised her chin. I'm sorry, I speak bluntly, please bear with me a little more. Lily's attitude towards her mother had already made Wenkanya very unhappy with her, so she was naturally rude when talking to her at this time. Although she scolded her without opening her mouth, but the words he said were more lethal than swearing. Tang Quanchong glared at Wenkanya. Yunbei only graduated from high school. This time something happened to Yun Mi, and Yunbei entered this terrible ancient tomb in order to save him, but she didn't know. If there is no chance to continue studying after going out, studying is originally the weakness of Yun and his daughter. When Kanya's words hit Yun Lily's weakness, Tang Quan was deeply afraid that Lily would think too much, so he was about to speak, but Lily pinched her with one hand. The female ghost threw the talisman with her other hand. The next moment, when Kanya heard a loud slap in the face. She didn't even see Lily's movements clearly, so she only felt a burning slap on her face. The tender skin quickly swelled up after being slapped. To be continued. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 920. Lily didn't know how the slap hit her. She was obviously still in her original position, but when Kanya felt as if the skin on her cheek had been broken, and someone pushed hot oil on it, she gasped in pain. A few breaths of cool air. Just now Lily moved quickly, not to mention that when Kanya didn't react. Even after Lance, who was holding her with one hand and being held by Mrs. Wen, raised his hand, he realized that when Kanya had been beaten. Although his expression was still, it was considered calm, but there was a look of horror in the lowered eyelids, and he clenched one hand tightly, and then let go after a long time. Lily glanced at Lance, then looked at Wenkanya, who was covering her face after reacting. I'm sorry, it hurt so much when I hit someone, please bear with it a little longer. After she finished speaking, she didn't care that Wenkanya was still grinning and gasping. Also, there are many examples in history books. It is always said that beauties are unlucky because no one cares about how long an ugly girl lives. So it does not mean that beauties are bound to be unlucky. After Lily finished speaking, she smiled slightly. I don't know whether you were born with a brain defect or because you are stupid from reading. I suggest you read less useless books, eat more grass, supplement the nutrition of your brain, and add some common sense. You will discover another new world. That's it? When Kanya's face changed in anger when Lily said it without any curse words. The female Taoist master has finished asking, can you let me go back? The female ghost was still caught in Lily's palm at this time. Lily had just strangled Wenkanya, but she couldn't escape yet. Now being restrained by Lily, she felt as if the ghost was about to be crushed away. As if coming, with begging in his mouth, Lily laughed. The pain in her back vest became more severe when the wound was touched, and the fishy smell came up in her throat again. She coughed twice. I'm not busy. Since you brought it to the door yourself, how do you get out of here? You should know. After saying that, she held the ghost tighter. Send us out. Upon hearing this, several people present had completely opposite expressions on their faces. Led by Tang Quan and others. This time, the few people who survived after being deceived into the ancient tomb by Mrs. Wen heard what Lily said. Even though they knew they were going to be with the ghosts, their eyes still couldn't help but shine brightly, as if Lily's words made them, as if they had a glimmer of hope. Everyone nodded hurriedly, but to everyone's surprise, Wenkanya, who was covering her face and crying out in pain, subconsciously shouted. No, she had just been slapped, and her cheeks were still red and swollen. Speaking at this time affected the wound at the corner of her mouth, making her voice seem a little weird, and her tone was a little urgent. It is absolutely impossible for us to return without success after entering the ancient tomb this time. Now since this ancient tomb is the tomb of Cao Lan, Emperor Xiao of Wei State, it has not been discovered by the National Archaeological Team. We have now discovered it. What a big breakthrough this is. Everything here has a certain archaeological value. She explained hurriedly. When she said the words return without success, Lily felt the white young man named Lance beside her. He frowned quickly. Although he quickly returned to his expressionless expression, Lily still noticed the strangeness just now. As soon as Wenkanya said these nonsense, there was no need for Lily to teach her a lesson this time. Zhao Hongsheng and others were extremely angry. They had lost their good impressions of the Wen family after knowing the truth about the Wen family's deception. Now it's not easy. After finding Wenkanya, MRS Wen's original commission was completed. A group of people came in and died. Hurt, paid such a high price. This place is obviously so evil, yet Wenkanya still refuses to leave. Several people were furious. If it weren't for Zhao Hongsheng and others who were afraid of the female ghost held in Lily's hand. I'm afraid they will all come forward and tear Wenkanya alive. If you want to die, it's your business. You can stay here and do archaeology slowly. It has nothing to do with us. We are leaving anyway. Zhao Hongsheng was so angry that she had just been captured by a female ghost. After entering the body, his face was extremely pale and he trembled all over and said something. The middle-aged fat man also nodded. Yes, now we have completed MRS Wen's commission. Now the road is facing the sky. Each side goes halfway. You want to, it's your business to stay, but MRS Wen, you still owe us money, so we can't let this go. My apprentice's life cannot be in vain. A quick voice came from MRS Wen's nostrils. Her mouth was sealed by Lily and she could not speak. At this time, she could only stare at her daughter with anxious, scared and helpless eyes, with a look of pleading. The white bone in her hand was tightly clasped with her fingers, and she couldn't get rid of it no matter what. She used all her strength at this moment, and the skin of her own palm was broken a lot, and the white bone seemed to be firmly, it was as if it had grown to a point on her palm and refused to fall off. At this time, MRS Wen was so frightened that her face was black and her face was like chaff. Although she could not open her mouth to speak, Wenkanya also understood her mother's temperament. Seeing this scene, Wenkanya seemed to have understood what she had not said, and sighed. Mom, I majored in history. There are still many places in history worth exploring. Now is such a good opportunity. If I leave, I may not be able to come back. You and Dad also supported me before she finished. A little sad, and his eyes gradually became firmer. I finally got in this time, and I don't want to miss it. If I can go back to the coffin of Emperor Xiao of Wei State that you mentioned above, there will definitely be many more discoveries. There was a hint of yearning and longing in her eyes. The mysterious spells of ancient times, as well as some ancient arts, the body of Emperor Xiao, and the ancient techniques for preserving corpses should all be made public to the world. After hearing what she said, MRS Wen shook her head like crazy. She remembered the ferocious corpse in the coffin that had stabbed her husband's head alive, and her tears flowed more quickly. A sultry smell spread from her body, and the sound of water dripping sounded. Lily turned her head to look, only to see MRS Wen only heard Wenkanya mention the emperor's corpse above. He was so frightened that he peed, and his brows furrowed involuntarily. When Wenkanya saw this scene, She thought her mother was frightened by the bones in her hands. She patted Mrs. Wen's shoulder in a somewhat uncomfortable comfort, hugged her, and looked back at Lance. At a glance. Lance, is there any way you can throw this bone away? I don't know where this thing came from. It appeared out of nowhere and grabbed Mrs. Wen. She refused to let go. She endured her fear and pulled it for Mrs. Wen, but she couldn't pull it off no matter how hard she tried. It took root in Mrs. Wen's palm. The foreigner, who had been silent all this time, raised his eyelids and shook his head with some regret. I'm sorry, yeah. I've tried it, but I can't do anything. The Chinese secret technique is indeed extraordinary. Maybe this lady has a way to solve it. He had tried it before, and Lance's hand was extremely strong. Those bugs were all torn off, but when Mrs. Wen was caught by the bones, he stepped forward and pulled them away. The bones seemed to be covered with a mysterious energy and could not be pulled away at all. Since Lily and others fell from above, Lance didn't say much. As soon as he opened his mouth, the ghost of the female ghost in Lily's hand looked towards him, and her soul shook. Lily looked at. He didn't make a sound even though he knew it. He followed Yinhun's line of sight and looked over. He happened to meet Lance's green eyes. He saw Lily looking towards him and smiled politely at Lily. He even bent over to her in a gentlemanly manner. He behaves like a nobleman in the Middle Ages. He is polite and courteous. His golden half-length slightly curly hair is combed straight back, revealing his plump white forehead and red lips. When he smiles now, he also shows his standard expression. He has 8 teeth. He has a good-looking appearance, red lips and white teeth, and very delicate facial features. He is a man who is very easy to please girls. But I wonder if the environment here is too gloomy, so his beauty exudes a bit of evil. His lips were too bright red, which seemed to be the reason for the strange firelight here. His teeth looked particularly clean and white, and the tiger teeth were slightly pointed, as if they could easily bite people's skin. However, under the dim black lotus ghost fire, they still gave off a heart-stopping glow. The luster comes. Lily looked at him and then turned her head away. There didn't seem to be anything wrong with Lance's behavior, but she just felt a little weird. This ancient tomb was so difficult, and a group of more than 30 Chinese Taoist priests came in and still managed to survive. Only 5 people survived, and Lily was among them. But this Lance led Wenkanya, a weak woman. He looked as tall and slender as a willow branch, and he was not a strong and powerful type. It seemed that he could survive and be fine in this ancient tomb for 2 days. It's not easy without any hardship. There's something wrong with Lance. Miss Wen, how did you enter the ancient tomb? Lily's attitude of ignoring Lance's words made Lance smile good-naturedly, as if he didn't mind Lily's rudeness, but Wenkanya was a little dissatisfied. Lance had entered the room a few months ago. One of the exchange students in the history department of the school, he is very fascinated by ancient Chinese history. With his handsome and charming appearance, he quickly became famous among the students. He has a good temper and is very knowledgeable. Not only is he not as proficient in the history of Central Europe as many professors in the history department, he is even very clear about some domestic histories. Wenkanya has been influenced by his parents since he was a child, while others only learned in elementary school. When she was literate, she had already begun to recite ancient texts. I wonder if she was influenced by these. When she grew up, she was very fascinated by ancient Chinese history. The appearance of Lance quickly made her obsessed with this handsome guy with both appearance and connotation. To be continued. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Wan Erwr. Chapter 921. Lance seemed to have noticed Wenkanya very quickly. The two had met several times by chance. After introducing each other, Wenkanya became even more fond of him. Lance found her before the break for 2 months before the semester. Saying that she accidentally got a map of the ancient Chinese tombs and wanted to go see it with her. This ancient tomb has not been developed and has never been heard of before. Wen Kanya is very fascinated by it. In addition, she has a good impression of Lance in her heart. She even consciously thought about being with him. The two have the same hobbies, they seem to be about the same age, they both majored in archaeology, and their looks are very matched. She likes Lance's politeness very much. This time, when Lance proposed to go on an adventure with her, firstly, Wen Kanya regarded him as a target and thought that she could develop a relationship with him along the way. Secondly, Wen Kanya was very fascinated by archaeology. Lance's proposal poked her weakness, a mystery that had never been discovered by anyone. She was immediately attracted by the ancient tomb and agreed. Before leaving, she originally wanted to tell her parents, but then she thought that she would ask for leave from the department, and it would only take more than a month to go back and forth. In college, Wen Kanya also worked with her tutor because of her outstanding performance in the past. She has been to archaeological sites several times, and she thinks she has some experience. She has studied this journey. If it goes well, it will not be delayed for long. If the news about the unexplored tomb leaks, I'm afraid she can't go either. In addition, she was worried that Mrs. Wen and Mr. Wen would worry about her safety and not allow her to go, so she thought about it and without telling her parents, she asked for leave from the department a month and a half in advance, and also pretended to invite several of her usual students girls who have a good relationship go out on adventures together. But these girls all refused for some reason. Finally, she and Lance arrived at this place. Although they knew the location of the cemetery at first, it was very difficult to enter. The two of them studied outside for nearly a month and wandered around for several days before entering the cemetery. For more than a month, Wen Kanya's mobile phone had no airtime charges. Secondly, this place was very desolate, and the signal was intermittent. Her heart was focused on Lance. Although she thought about calling her parents, she didn't go out because it was too difficult to go out. She didn't expect what would happen later. Parents will find the ancient tomb and come to look for her. As for Lily's question about how she entered the ancient tomb, to be honest, Wen Kanya felt like she knew how to get in, but when Lily asked, she seemed unable to say anything. In addition, Lance asked Lily, but she ignored him. Wen Kanya also he remembered Lily's slap in the face before, and thought of her words to humiliate him. Naturally, she didn't want to talk to her at this time. When Lily asked this question, she couldn't answer at first, and she really didn't want to say anything, so she turned away and didn't speak. Lance didn't care about Lily's attitude and said gently, "Madam, since we are all traveling together now, and there is no way out from here, why not untie Mrs. Wen's mouth and hands first?" Lily immediately noticed what Lance said. He said there was no way out from here. As if he had been here before and walked this road, Lily became more and more suspicious, but pretended not to hear the information he revealed. And Lily also discovered. Everyone was very scared when the female ghost appeared. But Lance was the only one who was very calm from beginning to end. Even when the female ghost twisted her hair and tried to drag them into the river, Wen Kanya and others behaved very normally and screamed, but he was just calm. "Just cut off that hair. Female Taoist master, he is right." This canal was dug out by a large number of people originally sent by Emperor Xiao to surround the entire mountain. The river is open and there is no way out. Just let me go back. I won't dare to do it again. Appeared the female ghost was a little timid. When Lance heard her say the words "he's right," a look of annoyance quickly flashed through Lance's eyes. Apparently, he now understood that he had said the wrong thing. But this man was very thoughtful and noticed something was wrong. He didn't mention it to anyone, he just stood aside with a smile on his face, holding Wen Kanya's hand. According to the Feng Shui treasure land, in addition to wind, there should also be water. In Feng Shui, water is not only responsible for wealth, but the most important thing is to gather yin. When Lily heard the female ghost's words, she snorted and put the hands in her hands. The hair that was still twisting was pulled tighter. "Stop talking nonsense. I'll tell you whether there is a road or not. I'd better bring the boat closer." Lily didn't believe that there was no road to the cemetery. It was too weird for Wenkanya and the two of them to come in, and the two of them didn't seem to be alike. Having met the snake, Lance should have been here before. There must be something wrong with him coming back again and bringing Wenkanya with him. She didn't want to get involved in this anymore and just wanted to get out quickly. Whether there is a way out here, she will decide after seeing it for herself. Even if there is really no way, she must find a way. She cannot be trapped here forever. Otherwise, if this continues, everyone will die even if they do not die from yin-chi erosion. Starved to death here, not to mention this female ghost took the initiative to appear in front of her. If this ghost escaped, the river would flow around the entire mountain as she said, so big that by then she wanted to hide. Where could he force her out? As soon as Lily finished speaking, she muttered a few spells in her mouth without thinking, and slapped them into the forehead of the ghost. She let out a scream, and her translucent body, which was originally looming, gradually became softer due to the slap. Some solidified. "I planted the power in your body, and you can't run away even if you want to. If you have any evil intentions, this power will damage your soul. If I am satisfied, I will cancel this power for you. And look for opportunities to transcend you." After a slap in the face, Lily gave another sweet date. The female ghost thought she was unlucky at first. She came out and wanted to drag a few more people into the water, but she didn't expect that they didn't catch them. Instead, she was caught and used as a laborer. When the Tao power was implanted in her body, her pale face looked even more ugly, and she was obviously still a little uncomfortable. But when she heard Lily's last words, she felt a little moved. She has stayed in this place for 800 years. During these years of being trapped here and unable to reincarnate, the female ghost is also tired, but she has never been able to escape. This place is isolated from the underworld. In addition, she died miserably, and the underworld is not at all. She would not accept such a resentful and sinister ghost. When she heard that Lily was willing to help her, the female ghost showed a bit of joy in her eyes, and then she bowed down respectfully. "Jade Lady of the slave family, I would like to thank the female fairy for my great kindness. This ghost is also used to following the wind. At first, he only called me master, but now he has been promoted to the level of summoning an immortal." When Lily saw that she had agreed, she reached out and put her back. The female ghost raised her hand, and the boat squirmed slowly. After a while, it became bigger. Only then did everyone realize that the boat was made of the black bugs at the bottom of the river turned into flesh, and Lily jumped on it. The other people were too scared to get on the boat, but Lance followed behind. When Kanya hesitated and helped Mrs. Wen up, Tang Quan and others watched. Lily was already on board, and she didn't dare to linger here any longer, so she bravely jumped onto the boat. The female ghost pointed at the bug and turned it into a chair. Lily sat down, and the other people didn't dare to sit. They had seen these before. The sight of bugs burrowing in and out of the female ghost's body made the solace of her feet start to feel numb. A group of people got on the boat, and the boat began to move slowly with the sound of sound. The reason why the boat could move even if there was no wind or waves before was purely because of the insects crawling under the boat. The river was full of such black insects, so there were no traces of rippling river water during their movements. Lily got on the boat, and with the thought in her mind, she pointed at Mrs. Wen and called out, "Break." Mrs. Wen, who had not been able to make a sound for a long time, cried out with a wow, and she was trembling while holding her daughter. "Kanya, Kanya, Kanya, let's go back, go back. In order to come to you, your father is dead now. Mom only has you. My dear daughter, go back, Mother begs you madam, cried till she burst into tears. When she heard Wenkanya talk about archaeology, she was as anxious as an ant on a hot pot. She also heard that Wenkanya was so audacious that she wanted to study Emperor Xiao of the Wei state. She was frightened. Her 3 souls and 7 souls almost left her body, but her mouth was sealed by the Taoist magic and she couldn't scream. Once her voice was released, Mrs. Wen quickly began to plead. Mom, please, listen to Yoon Lily and the others. As she spoke, she desperately reached out to grab the bone-white palm. Strangely enough, the bone-white palm looked like it had been there for some years. The wrist was moist and soft, and it would break when she scratched it, but no matter how hard she grabbed it, pinch, but this thing stuck tightly and just couldn't be grasped. Everything here made Mrs. Wen frightened. After finding her daughter, she didn't want to stay for a quarter of an hour. Calm down, Mom. It's not that serious. Listen to me. It's not easy for Lance and I to come here. We have done a lot of preparations before, not to mention that there is something Lance wants here. When under her mother's begging, Kanya burst into tears involuntarily when she heard that her father had passed away. She subconsciously began to comfort Mrs. Wen. When Lily heard this, she curled up her lips and smiled. She knew there was something she couldn't ask, so it was really useful to use Mrs. Wen to open her mouth. When Kanya was anxious and said the words "there is something Lance wants in the tomb," Lance revealed in his previous words he must have been to this ancient tomb before. Now there are things he needs in the cemetery. A woman like Wenkanya is still brought by him. This Lance looks gentle and polite, but he is regardless of appearance. Lily firmly believed that a barking dog would not bite, and she was even more aware of Lance's weirdness. To be continued.